Welcome to the Education Scotland podcast. In every episode, we are joined by teachers, professionals and experts to unpack some of the big questions and topics facing the education sector in Scotland. Stay informed with the latest on education in Scotland by subscribing to our podcast.
Hello and welcome to another podcast by Education Scotland, and this time the Parents and Families team will be focusing on attendance, and we are delighted to be joined by colleagues from Smithycroft High School. My name's Susan Doherty, and I'm going to get you guys to introduce yourselves before we get started.
I'm Janice Baxter, Deputy Head Teacher at Smithycroft.
And I'm Patrick Oberg, I'm the Head Teacher at Smithycroft.
So welcome to both of you to this podcast.
Thank you.
I'm delighted that you're here today. We've been working with each other for a while now on attendance with a particular focus on parents and families, and I've just been blown away by the work that you guys do in Smithycroft. So I guess we probably want to start at the beginning. If you could tell us a wee bit about your school, where it is, what the community is like, just set the scene for us.
Yeah, of course, yeah. We're very much located in the heart of Glasgow's East End, so we're quite an urban school. We're right alongside the M8. All our young people walk to school, so we've got quite a tight-knit community. We do have the majority of our young people who would be in SIMD 1 and 2, so that gives you an idea of sort of the kind of the profile of some of our families and parents, and that very much just defines the challenge that they might have in their daily lives and the work that we might need to do with them. So that there's very much a sense of community around Smithycroft, and that's something that's supported us in the work that we've been doing around attendance.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you very much. It sounds like quite an exciting school, and the fact that everybody
Absolutely.
walks there is quite unusual, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can see that would create that real community spirit amongst the students, but also the families that are probably maybe walking beside them as well. So I guess we're going to jump into the attendance that we're here to talk about. So I guess it would be good for us if you could just tell us about your work within the school on attendance, in particular, how you engage those parents and families to support the work.
Yeah, we identified attendance as an area for focused improvement, probably just post-COVID, and I came into post in March of 2020, and it was clear from looking at some of the data that attendance was going to be an area that we needed to focus on. So attendance wasn't where it needed to be, and I think that's probably an important point to note, that we were starting from what I would consider to be a relatively low base. We could see that there was absolutely scope for improvement there. So then it was about, right, how do we pull together our strategic plan around making sure that we can impact this in the longer term, as opposed to trying to put sticking plasters over things or contact families and children and try and get them to come to school without really laying the foundations around, excuse me, how do we go about this in the longer term? So that was the big focus for us, really. At the time, we had a deputy in the school who was doing a master's in educational leadership. Attendance was his focus. So we very much engaged around research, what was working well in other schools, what was working well in other countries, and to enable us to be sure that the type of work that we were doing was going to be the right type of work. This enabled us to pull together our attendance matters strategy, which I know Janice is going to talk a little bit more about in detail. But what's probably important to note is that the pupil support principal teachers in the school and other staff who worked with families already knew families well and young people well, and were already really committed to making sure that those families were supported and young people could attend well. It was actually more about how do we sharpen the focus of the work that we're doing so that it can have some impact. And how are we going to measure that impact so that we really know that it's making a difference?
Mm-hmm. And I think we spoke before about you weren't looking at the immediate impact, you were looking for generational impact, really.
Yeah.
And the whole school staff was totally on board with that.
Yeah, and it's about how far up your priority list you put it. And I think at the time it was clear to us that it needed to be a focused priority, and that was going to be the case for the whole school. So how do we make it clear to everybody across the school that attendance is a priority, and not just pupil support teachers who are working hard every day to try and make sure that young people are attending, working with their families. Maybe sometimes in a secondary school, we can see that as the work of the pupil support team, as opposed to the work of everybody. And so there's something cultural maybe there in the approach that we were taking. But what was becoming clear to us as we started to formulate the strategy was, there's no silver bullet here. There's not one approach that we can take which is going to make a significant difference. We need to work in several different ways. And then we need to be able to monitor the impact of that over time and to check that it's making the difference that we wanted it to make.
And Janice, we mentioned attendance matters, so that's your baby.
Yes.
So do you want to tell us a wee bit more about that?
No problem. So we self-evaluated the culture, the systems and the practices that we had in place. And as Patrick said, there was already a plethora of work that was going on with the pupil support team. It wasn't about working harder, it was about working smarter and using that data-led approach to actually track and monitor the attendance, the patterns, and be able to kind of evaluate the success. So the Attendance Matters strategy is focused on 4 key components. We have the responsibility of all, early intervention and prevention, targeted intervention, and rewards, recognition and praise. And if we strip it back to the responsibility of all, that's split into 4 sub-factors where we've got pupils, staff, pupil support and staff. And that has been, I would say, transformational in getting us from A to B in terms of moving our attendance. So the responsibility of the young people is to be on time. We know that there has been a lot of work that we needed to do to improve the late coming for our young people. And one of the things that we did there was we digitised our late line strategy. So rather than young people coming in and signing into the office, maybe going to registration or not going to registration and they're being missed and it's appearing like their TBC that day, young people come in, they scan the code and that automatically gets generated to our office ladies who update that every morning and throughout the day. That opportunity then allows us to filter those that come in between 8:50 and 9 in the morning and be able to rectify those TBCs to say that we actually know if young people are in the building. And if they're not, then that obviously triggers our group hall home. What we've noticed as well is that has reduced the amount of group calls that we're sending home saying we don't know where your young person is. Young people now just know it's part of their daily practice. So I would say we're now at the point where that's an embedded thing that's had an impact for us. We also have attendance focus in our daily assemblies. So we've got year team assemblies every week. That's consistent. Young people know the standards and expectations. We also have a focus on that during PSE time. So it's almost that it's a constant reminder for young people that actually there is a responsibility for you to get into the building, get in on time, show up so that we can make the difference by giving you the best teaching and learning and get those improved outcomes. So it's about that partnership. For the staff, accurate registers, and I know that might seem like a given. I know it's the only thing that we're legally bound by, that we need to absolutely have an accurate register, but ultimately there are mistakes that can sometimes be made. So we have got a school support officer who's fantastic and communicates our discrepancy list every single day. And that's the responsibility not just of pupil support staff, but all staff in the building to check that at the end of every day and alert the school support officer to any mistakes that have been made. And then what that does is the next day gets disseminated to pupil support and they can rectify the ones that are left. So all TBCs are aimed to be resolved, and they're aimed to be resolved as quickly as possible. As we say, it's our responsibility to make sure that we know exactly where young people are. We've also got the nurturing conversations. Attendance or reasons for young people not attending can be multifaceted. But if young people feel like you care about them and you're having calm, nurturing conversations about maybe particular reasons why they're struggling with something, if we can support them, remove that barrier, then that, of course, is going to absolutely support them to want to be in the building, which obviously is fantastic if we can get them there. Consistent use of permission slips. So We need to know where all young people are at all time. If they're in the building, they're our responsibility. So any young person that is allowed to go to the toilet, if they're going a message for a member of staff, they must have a pink slip. That pink slip will be there to communicate if a member of SLT or a member of staff spots a young person in the corridor. Everybody's accounted for, and actually it has reduced the wandering, because what we have been able to do is look at the data that we're getting for that. We retain all the pink slips. That goes to pupil support at the end of every day. I then collect them in termly, and we're able to then analyse that data to see, right, how many young people are actually out the class, how many young people are out the class multiple times over a day, what's the pattern for maybe specific departments, individual members of staff, and we can then create an approach to try and support reducing that. Pupil support, so they are at the heart of caring for young people. Attendance, as Patrick said, is a priority, but we've got review and action daily tasks and weekly. So for us, the vulnerable young people in the school, so whether that be our care experienced learners or young people who have got additional support needs or in our BG classroom, they are alerted. We've got their names highlighted. We are aware of them, not just in the pupil support, but in our year team model, and I'll come on to that a bit later. We have those young people, if they're not in the building, then they absolutely must have a phone call home that day. And that allows us to have that regular communication, regular contact with home to make sure that our young people are safe and accounted for. The daily tasks of the discrepancies. So as I was saying, we must resolve them all. And also we get our office ladies email our morning and afternoon attendance. And it's the responsibility of the pupil support teacher to keep an eye on that attendance throughout the day. So that may be if a young person has been in, but then they're maybe not in class, then we can get to that early and we can able to resolve it. The weekly strategy is I email out the late line data every Friday for pupil support staff to analyse the following week. Not only that, but we send out the weekly attendance heat maps, and we also send out the student absence report. That data extracted from CMIS allows us to identify patterns. It allows us to then prioritise where our focus should be, rather than just thinking on the day-to-day reactionary. It's about actually getting ahead of that and supporting the individual needs of those young people. So we're able to then, when I send the student absence report, I'm able to extract the data and prioritise for each year group anybody below the 85% attendance. What we can then see is the pattern of that for anybody that is now maybe dropped below 85%, or is there a young person that's consistently been on that, and we can then speak at our year team meetings to say, right, well, what are we doing about it? What interventions have we got? The weekly attendance heat maps is really good because that's given us that weekly overview of attendance for S1 to S6. We can then compare that to previous weeks. We can compare it to last year's data, 2-year data, and then that can allow us to see where we're going. And again, we'll come into the statistics later, but that has shown us that we are making great progress over the last 2 years. SLT, we have a responsibility, although the attendance primarily, the day-to-day work sits with pupil support. Our year team model supports the team around those young people to make sure that we're getting it right. So those weekly assemblies are paramount to reinforcing those standards and expectations. We've got our behaviour and inclusion policy. So that is about as many young people being in class, learning, getting a high quality experience, and us as members of ELT and SLT going round and supporting those young people that have maybe had to step outside. We can have those nurturing conversations and aim to resolve it and get them back in. So again, it's reducing the number of young people in the building but not in the class. That's really responsibility of all. The early intervention and prevention I would say the year team model works really effective. We are now in year 3 of the year team model, and actually having the system really supports that no young person is missed. So you've got your DHT, your pupil support teacher, your associate pupil support teacher who helps with a particular cohort in that year group, and they're working all together with, for example, MS2. So we work really closely together, myself and the pupil support teacher and the associate pupil support teacher, and what we do is we extract that data that I was mentioning about the heat maps and the student absence report and the late line, and we go through it at our year team meeting every week. It's a standing item on the agenda. The meetings are minuted, it's robust, it's rigorous, and we're able to then identify where the concerns are and put interventions in place to be absolutely able to make a difference. The impact for us is obviously apparent, I think, the reason why we're here. So we've already seen a 40% reduction in the daily group calls that's going home for absences. We are obviously improving our attendance to the point that we are up to 86%. So that early identification and prevention is really part of the success. The targeted interventions, which is the third key component for us, as I said earlier, the reasons why young people don't attend, they're multifaceted. We need to get to the root of what's causing them to not want to attend so that we can support. Their individual needs are completely different. But as Patrick mentioned earlier, it's about not just having the systems and that in place, it's about the young people feeling like you genuinely care and you want to make a difference and you want to have their needs being met. That is something that the pupil support team are fantastic with, and they can really make that difference. But also we've got whatever the needs of the young people are, we can meet their needs. So we this year have started our health and wellbeing staged intervention process, which pupil support are able to identify those young people that are maybe struggling with attendance. But what are the reasons? So it may be that they struggle with their mental health. They may have anxiety around being in the building, a particular class. But we can then discuss them at our health and wellbeing staged intervention meeting, and we can allocate them to support through our external partners, whether that be FAIR, MCR, we've got a family support worker, and we can actually give them that support that can bridge the gap between non-attendance and getting them back into the building. We've got your flexible learning plans, which I'm sure almost every school in Scotland will have, but again, tailoring it to the individual needs of those young people. For us, parental engagement was something that really drove forward our attendance matter strategy. Our parent council, really active, fantastic in applying for funding for us to have a family support worker, and that family support worker has been able to work with identified families who have school refusers or whatever needs, not just with the young person but with the families, and they work specifically with them to get them back into education. So all of those targeted interventions actually have been really transformational for some of our young people. Rewards and recognition. So young people love praise, adults love praise, I love praise. So it's really important that when things are going well, we can recognise it and we can reward them. So although we're saying about the assemblies, we're reinforcing expectations. Sometimes with my S2s, I've had many challenges to try and have class v class in that year group. Can they improve on the attendance from where they were in one point to a month's time against another class? It's that excitement, it's that drive, it's that want to do better. And then when they do better, it's about celebrating the success. So we've got shout outs that we do. Patrick loves the tannoy, loves to give some praise, shout outs to the young people. We do termly attendance certificates. So for those that have been in the 80 to 90% attendance bracket for a particular term, we reward that. But again, that's not just catering for everybody, because we know that there's some reasons why young people can't be in the building. So we recognise the young people that have even improvement in their attendance between 10 and 20%, they would be rewarded. And we've got prize draws for all accomplishments as well. So yeah, we do love a bit of praise for our young people.
Well, let me give you a wee bit of praise now. Because that is such a robust strategy and data driven. I mean, it's just amazing. And I'm pretty sure that those listening will be saying the same. They'll just be like, wow, how can we learn from these guys?
There's a couple of real important points, I think, listening to Janice, which probably need to be made, which we accept that lots and lots of the things we're doing, they're not groundbreaking things, that they're not brand new things. Like I say, it's not a silver bullet that we're doing. What you probably will hear from listening to Janice talk about it is there's a rigour around what's going on. Mm-hmm. There's a universal offer for everybody. Attendance is absolutely at the top of everybody's list. Mm-hmm. So every young person whose attendance is already good understands that it needs to stay there. Mm-hmm. Then there's bits about, well, what about those young people who really struggle to attend? What's the targeted bit that we might do there? Mm-hmm. So it's projecting a message to the school that not only does attendance matter, but every young person matters. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter what your individual struggle is, or even if your attendance is really, really strong. Mm-hmm. We'll recognise it and we'll promote positive attendance for you too. So there's back to that bit about there's a rigour and there's a structure and there's systems and they need to be in place and they need to be robust and we need to be able to monitor impact. But there needs to be a cultural bit that sits underneath it, which is this matters. Yeah. And we want young people to achieve and we want them to do well. And, maybe sometimes with attendance, you need to be a bit like a dog with a bone.
Absolutely.
And you're really not letting up and there's a relentlessness about it, which means that it's high profile.
Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that, you talk about the barriers to participation can be so different for each child, but the flexibility of really understanding the individual needs of the child and then putting the intervention in place at that point must make a huge difference to those young people who are like, well, actually, they're listening to me, they understand my needs. And that must make a huge difference for them. Yeah,
and I think maybe sometimes in communities like ours, and sometimes people have not had a positive experience of education in their family, or let's say, or face lots of barriers to participation, perceive the school as somewhere that wants to give them a out because they're not coming to school. Yes. It's, right, well, how do we turn that on its head a little bit? And say to people, well, actually, what we're trying to do is sell the benefits of it to you. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to explain to you, see if you come, it's not even just about what you might achieve, but there's your own sense of well-being and the friendships that you'll make and just the inclusion part of that, I suppose, which we feel matters. So we've probably done quite a bit of work there on, right, why is this important? Mm-hmm. As opposed to, as a school, we need to make you do it. Yeah. Which is a slightly different message. We can't make you do it. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, you'll make a choice about whether you want to attend or whether you won't. Mm-hmm. Right? So how can we help support you in making what we think is absolutely the right choice by being there every day? Mm-hmm.
And you touched a wee bit on the fact that some of the parents might have had a negative experience of school. So I suppose we probably want to tease a wee bit of that out. And if we could just talk a wee bit about why you think it's important for parents and families to be involved in improving attendance.
Yeah, I think that it's probably, it's not exactly rocket science to say that the parents and families have a massive influence on young people.
Yes.
And are the first influencers for young people in many, many ways. And so that working alongside them is really the only option we might have around that. They're the most influential people. So getting them on board, matters hugely because they're the ones who are at home every day trying to get young people. And we need to acknowledge some of the challenges that sit around that. Yes. And particularly for some of the challenges for our families that were accentuated by periods of lockdown and COVID. And we're all working in a slightly different environment now as a result of that. But one of the things that we would talk about is, meeting them where they are. So that might actually be physically meeting them where they are. going and seeing them and meeting them in the local community, or going to the local retail park and the coffee shop and talking to them, or visiting their houses, and actually breaking down those barriers between what they might see as this kind of institution that is trying to make their child do something which they may not be completely on board with, and actually trying to help them see that we want to stand alongside them. And I think that language is probably quite important as well. This is not about us. There's no hierarchy here. This is just about us wanting the best for your young person in the way that you want the best for them. And if we don't work with them in that way, they won't be able to have that influence at home in a positive way that their young people need. So there's probably quite a lot in there, which probably comes back to that cultural bit about, right, well, let's try and understand first. Let's understand why young people are not attending and the problems that their families have. And if we understand those problems, we can work alongside the family in addressing them, as opposed to sending out letters asking, why is your child not attending? Which it's just not having impact.
Yeah.
It's not making a
Which
difference.
is probably just another letter that's coming in from, as you say, another institution.
Yeah.
That's just sometimes overwhelming these families.
Because maybe they're already feeling overwhelmed.
Yes.
They've got a lot going on in their life. There's lots of challenges that they're facing, and that's adding to the stress and the worry and anxiety about it, rather than actually us supporting.
Yes.
I think for me, having the appointment of a family support worker has been instrumental in building those relationships between home and school, because as we've said, sometimes the building can be quite a daunting place for them, maybe bringing back difficult memories. Having somebody that's not a teacher, that doesn't have that that kind of stigma attached to it, which a lot of families feel, has actually been great. So our family support worker, we had identified that there was 42 families who were non-attenders for different reasons, and that family support worker has been key in going out and supporting those families. So it's not about just supporting the young person, it's actually about supporting the families, so that we can really get to the reason of what the challenges are and how we can make a difference and make changes. So our family support worker works across all year groups, and at the moment she's supporting approximately 30 families. But it is about relationship building, and it's about even just tapping on the door for a couple of minutes a day in the beginning. How are you doing? How are you? Can I help you with anything? Once that relationship is there, she's now being responsible. She'll do pickups and drop-offs to bridge the gap between home and school, because a lot of the time, sometimes even just getting out the house and walking to school can be a massive challenge. The social aspect of it, that type of thing. So she'll be responsible for pickups and drop-offs. She'll take parents to appointments. So if they've got a GP appointment, or they maybe need referred to a particular service, she can help with the referral forms. And a lot of our families have been so thankful that she's been there. And it builds that relationship to then feel that there's trust, that we can then arrange that meeting. And the family support worker is almost there to kind of support and mediate. One of our families recently, she's referred to the Richmond Fellow Trust for bereavement. So again, they're helping the parents, which then ultimately is going to help that young person. So they're absolutely instrumental. We've got another young person at the moment who this year came from another local authority and had only attended 3 days of school in previous year. Attendance in Smithycroft is 100%. And the relationship that we've got with his kinship carer is fantastic. The communication is regular, it's ongoing, it's supportive, and we're able to meet his needs. And the outcome of seeing the difference in attendance is one thing, but also seeing the development of that young person emotionally is on a different level. So the parents and us working in tandem is so crucial.
Yeah, there's something there, as Janice is talking about that, which is probably quite pertinent, which is the role of that family support worker is to work with parents and families, and actually not to work with young people. And so you'll hear that in some of those actions around taking parents to GP's appointments. This is not in order that we can then drop the child at the school on the way. This is just about supporting the parent and nothing more. So we might work with families in that way over a number of weeks before we even start a conversation about whether their child will return to school. So there's a bit there about relationship building and developing trust and people understanding the motive around the work and allowing them to make sense of it over time by investing in people with it, as opposed to the suspicion which we would all feel as adults around somebody coming and knocking on our door and starting asking questions about something that made us feel uncomfortable. Right, well, that's not what this is. So, and as Janice said, working there with a number of families whose children and young people found it incredibly difficult to come to school. So, not those who maybe had 80% attendance and could we get it to 90, but people who just weren't coming to school. And Janice raised a good example there of somebody who's transformed their attendance as a result of the work that our family support work has been able to do with them.
So for me, what's coming across is the relationships, the transparency, and the fact that you are getting the parents to understand that you're all in it together. That there's no hidden agenda.
No.
It's just everything's out on the table. So
and there can be some cynicism around that. Well, we've got targets to meet around improving attendance, or this is the kind of the reason that we're doing it, or there's an obligation at local authority level to be contacting parents and making sure that we're trying to improve, which there is for good reason, and so there should be. But if that's all we do, without really going, right, well, what's really happening here on a human level?
Yes.
And can we get under what's happening on a human level?
Yes.
We might actually be able to make a difference in the longer term. And again, to return to the cynical bit about that, if we've now got a young person who's attending 100% of the time, there's no longer as much work to do there around that young person, and they're getting the benefit without the daily phone call or whatever it might be. Because I think that attendance can be a difficult thing to shift, and nobody is suggesting for a minute that it's not. It is difficult. I think the other thing to maybe mention, which Janice touched on earlier, is how you then share the impact of the work that you're doing in order to continue to motivate people around it.
Yeah.
So we've probably done quite a bit of work around how do we share the success. So when you get some early gains and you start to see attendance moving, but that might be in year groups, in classes, at whole school level, or it might just be around individuals, right? How do we celebrate that in order that we can demonstrate to the wider community that actually you can make a difference here?
Yes. And
you can move these figures and you can get young people back to school in a world where sometimes we think actually it's going to be incredibly difficult to do it. So it is difficult, but it's not impossible.
It's lovely to hear how much you care about the young people and their families and the community. And it isn't just about the figures.
No.
But let's segue into the figures. Because
Janice will be able to keep you right on all of that. Because they do matter. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Exactly. And just for the listeners, they're probably like, no, this sounds amazing, but what impact has there been? Like, so if we could just maybe touch on that, Janice, just about
Of course. So in the last 2 years, our headline attendance figure has improved by 4.8%. So we're up to 86.1%. And it's the biggest attendance improvement in all 30 Glasgow secondary schools, which we are extremely proud about. Our even S6, as an example, has averaged a year group attendance of over 88% this year. And we've been able to celebrate not only like the overall attendance, but successes individually with year groups and different things like that. So for us, that's clearly having a direct impact on the young people and what they can achieve every single day. And that's tying in with our tagline of like attend today, achieve tomorrow. So the weekly student absence report that I was referring to, again, when I look back at key measures over the academic year, just to give you an example, so from December, we had 45 young people that had below 50% attendance. And this week, we've actually got 27 of those young people. So we're 18 less young people, which means those young people are in the building, they're getting the mental, emotional, social support, but they're also getting access to quality learning and teaching, which ultimately is going to improve the outcomes for those young people.
Yes.
We're also seeing a difference in our 50 to 69% category of attendance. So again, between December and May, we're looking at 30 more young people being in the building compared to where they were. And that's through that targeted intervention, the early intervention and prevention. And again, the 70 to 85%, which is your young people that are most often in the building, but a wee day here or there, we've really focused on making sure that we can move those attendance figures. And again, from the difference from December till May, we've got 58 more young people back in the building more regularly, and that for us is fantastic, because if we can get them in the building, we can then get the access to the learning and teaching, the outcomes, the opportunities. So that has really been key for us to see that the data is telling us that we're moving in the right direction. We're not saying that we're there yet. We've got work to continue to do, but what we're seeing is that we're doing the right type of work. We're not working really hard and not seeing a difference. We're being able to use that data-led approach to look at what the data is telling us, make the changes, implement it, review it, and here's the outcome. So we're really, really pleased with that, aren't we, Patrick?
Yeah, and I think probably what Janice is describing there is impact at every level.
Yes.
So if we look at every single year group in the school, we're showing their attendance improving year on year. If we look at the overall headline attendance figure for the school, as Janice says, it's gone up by about 5% over the last 2-3 years. If we look at the young people who historically attended somewhere between 0 and 20%, well, they're now attending in the next category up, maybe between 20 and 50%. Young people whose attendance was between 70 and 80%, most of them are now in the 80 to 90% bracket. So all of these figures are cumulatively coming together to support the notion that, as Janice says, the right work is happening in the right way. You know, and as a head teacher and as senior leaders in the school, that's the thing that you focus on, because in every school in Scotland, people are working incredibly hard every day to try and improve lives for young people.
Yes.
They absolutely are. And we're no different from that. But what we need to be sure of is that we're doing the right work, and that the work that we're doing is having the impact. And maybe some of the work that we've done with the staff team over the piece is, how can we stop doing work that might be having impact in order to do work which could potentially have more impact? And there is a risk there. You know, around and staff in schools would worry about that, right? If we stop doing something and start doing something else, what if it either doesn't improve, or what if it goes backwards? Right? Okay, well, let's monitor it carefully. Let's make sure we're clear on what those measures are going to be, and we can check that it's having the impact that it's having, in order that we can adjust our approach if we need to. So yeah, I mean, in terms of the headline numbers and what that shows us is we're really delighted with it, because we can see the impact of it. But the probably the strongest thing it does is then it helps to develop that culture that we can make a difference, and we are making a difference. And that's important for everybody involved. It's important for young people, for their families, and it's important for the staff that are working with them every day as well.
I mean, I can see how incredibly hard you guys have worked, the whole school has worked, even the young people have probably worked, and the families have worked to get to this point where, you know, your stats are great, right? So I don't know if I want to ask, because I'm like, where do you go after this? But,
well, you know, we've got plans.
Yeah. And I'll probably help you a little bit with that, because it's, as Janice has been talking about, it's been about our improvement journey.
Right.
So there absolutely are schools in Scotland and schools in Glasgow where attendance will be better, in inverted commas, than ours in terms of headline figures. And that's not really what we're here to talk about today. It's about an improvement journey. So we've managed to move that figure in the right direction, probably whilst a lot of schools across Scotland have struggled to even maintain the level that they're at. So we've still got some way to go, I suppose, and we're probably pretty determined that there's more work to do there to try and make sure that you know, everybody's ideal would be every child's in the building every single day, right? Now, okay, that's maybe we're not going to get there, but there's still work to do there.
Yeah, so what we would like to do is, obviously we've rolled out our Attendance Matters strategy, in our school, but we're a school community. So I think building the partnership between us and our associate primary schools to maybe have that one approach that actually suits everyone, and it's that, we're able to then share that impact and that strategy and that approach, just because we are a community, and it's not just that we're isolated and once you leave P7 and come to S1, it's that collegiate approach. So that would be the next step, but also again now thinking about getting down to like the granular level of, right, well, where is the individual areas for improvement? So we've obviously rolled out this approach that all pupil support are driving forward and the whole staff, but the data is now telling us, right, okay, we can look into maybe the below 50% or the 50 to 70%. So for us, it's about those young people that are still in that below 50% category. What are the additional alternatives that we can offer them that would allow us to make that difference? So we're looking at external offerings. So we're in talks just now with the School of Hard Knocks. It's a rugby programme. They're delivering in other secondary schools in the council with great reviews. It's not just rugby, but it's actually about using rugby as a tool or the medium to drive improvement. There's a mentorship that's attached to it. So for those young people, it's not working individually with every class teacher, moving around the building, transitioning from one class to the other. It's about a set group of people that can mentor them, giving them the physical development, the emotional support, tying that in with what does their alternative curriculum look like. So we have core qualifications for our maths, for English, health and wellbeing, and that will create a programme that could be delivered off campus. So they're still having that access to education with members of staff, but there's also not that stigma that some of them feel attached to with the school building. Yeah. So we've got access to that through our external partners as well. We've got access to St Paul's Youth Forum, which is a fantastic resource up in our community, where they've got a farm, they've got a cafe, they've got loads of different things that can support the needs of those young people, not just about the academic support that they can offer. We've got Junction 12, who are another fantastic charity organisation that work really well with supporting the kind of mental and emotional wellbeing of our young people. So we've got all of those external offerings that can support those young people below 50%. That's not that that's your timetable and that'll be it. That's a phase of getting them back into full-time education. Mm-hmm. But what we are doing is we're recognising that need is there at the moment. Mm-hmm. By offering that through our external partners, that really gives our pupil support colleagues and the year team model to really hone in and focus on the young people that are in the building 70 to 85% of the time, and they'll be able to really get down to the nitty-gritty of the TBCs, the contact home, the relationship building, and that will be able to hopefully get the small improvements in the individual cohorts or with young people. So for us, that would be the kind of next step.
Just the one then? That was a lot.
I think there's a bit here about right, which Janice is describing about. Well, we continue with that data-led approach, where we go right. Let's continue to monitor impact across all of these cohorts. Let's talk to young people about what's motivating them, why they won't come to school, why they do want to come to school, and what we need to offer. And what Janice is describing there is just one offer, maybe, like you say, of a different kind of package of support that young people might need. And then we need to look at the curriculum and what's our curriculum offer for young people, what's learning like in the classroom, what are all, attendance is not just about how can we get somebody out of their house and get them into the school building. Yeah. Now, on one level, that's what it is. Actually, there are many, many different layers to it, which we need to continue to look at. And as Janice says, it's maybe about then looking at in more granular detail which specific cohorts are we finding a little bit more difficult to move. because what that's telling us is they've got particular barriers that we haven't yet been able to maybe uncover and find a solution for. And some of the issues that they might have around working with us or engaging with education can be really deep rooted. So it takes time, and we don't expect to be able to solve the problem quickly or simply. So there's a bit of stickability there that you kind of need to have, and you also need to acknowledge that not everything that you're going to try is going to have the impact that you would hope it would have. And that you don't become deterred by that, and you continue to move forward with the things that you can see are really making a difference.
I love the fact, though, that you're taking cognizance of that, and you have, dare I say, the humility to say we might get things wrong, but we'll try, and if it doesn't work, we are flexible enough to then move on to something else that we think, well, once you get that deeper understanding of the needs, which can be very complex, for some of our young.
And I think there's a bit there which we don't maybe consciously do, but we're trying to say to young people and families, look, you'll get it wrong as well.
Yes.
And that's okay.
It is okay.
So see if you're struggling to get your young person to school every day, right? That's kind of normal. Yes. That might happen. And we might have it in our own private lives as well, so so we're just like you and you're just like us, and we're trying to do this together. Yes. And so by acknowledging the things that we're not always getting right, but having a shared sense of purpose about what we're trying to achieve, encourages people to work with us in a kind of more positive way, if you like. And that's maybe just been a happy byproduct of an approach that we've taken, and we think a lot about getting alongside people and what support they need to try and so that we can help them in a way that, and again, I wouldn't want to suggest that other schools don't do that. We're just here today to talk about sort of our experience of how we've tried to do that. One of the things which we've not mentioned, which might be useful just as an additional thing, is we, as Janice said there, we work with St Paul's Youth Forum, or a local youth organisation, and they give us access to their premises in order that we can work there with young people and families. And so the families and the young person can go to that centre, and we will meet them there, and we will work with them there. The teachers go down there to work with them. And so it acts as a bridge, a kind of halfway house between, right, well, this is just a place in your community that you will go to. You don't want to come to school. Right, well, we'll meet you there, and we'll work with you there, and then we can start to introduce the idea that you might want to come into school with us once we've built that relationship over a period of time.
And the families can come with them. There's a cafe, so they can work on their education with that member of staff, but their family can be in the cafe next door. So it's that supportive approach.
Yes. Breaks down a lot of stigma probably, and builds their confidence, because they'll feel comfortable probably in that community space.
Absolutely.
And then once their confidence is built up, they can
they can then, or we can look at some of those alternatives that Janice was talking about.
Yeah. So that's a lot, right? So that's a lot you've done, and a lot that's coming. So I'm excited to see where this goes with you guys, and I'm just blown away by the impact that you're already having.
Thank you.
So we talked about some schools that are probably facing similar journey, but do you have any advice to your colleagues in other schools who are maybe just starting this work on attendance, or maybe are finding it a wee bit of a challenge? What would be the key things you would say to them?
I mean, probably that we're still there, we're still thinking about that. And so we don't, like I say, we don't think we've cracked anything at all. But we recognise the difficulties of it. We probably we've thought about, how do we make it really high profile? How do we make sure everybody in the school knows that this matters? And when schools have got tons of different competing priorities. So we did lots and lots of things which made that obvious. Even some really simple little cultural things, like in updates for staff every week, the very first thing would be a positive attendance message. So we've also learned the importance of sticking at it. The boots on the ground, the slog, if you want to call it that, which is not fashionable and people don't always see. There's a lot of that goes into attendance. We would always start with the data. What's the data telling us? Not because we don't care about young people. Actually, the data is a reflection of young people. So when we look at, which particular groups of young people are not attending well, that tells us these are the people we need to talk to about the work that we need to do. So what does that data tell you about all those different cohorts? And then let that try and guide your action in some way, whilst being flexible about it. And knowing that you're playing a long game for sure in getting young people back to school. But probably, as you'll hear from somebody this morning, if you can do that, it's absolutely transformative. Yeah. You know, if somebody starts attending regularly in a secondary school when they previously didn't, it might change their life forever. So the potential impact of the work that you're doing is huge, despite the fact that sometimes you can feel like you're on a real treadmill with some of the daily and weekly work that you're doing. And then absolutely celebrating when it starts to have impact matters. Can you see the difference that the work we're doing is making? Is a thing which in a school community matters hugely, because work around attendance can feel demoralizing if it's not having the impact that you want it to have. So find those successes. Even if some of those headline figures are not quite moving in the way that you would like, you will absolutely have individual young people who will have a testimony about the impact that the work that you've done has had on them. So I think that matters hugely, and you just keep going. You keep going, and you review what you're doing, and you don't give up, which might seem pretty obvious, but that's probably what we've learned.
A dog with a bone.
That's it. That's what we are. Yeah.
These are tenacious for sure.
Yeah. And I think also, if I can say, you know, with Janice here, somebody in charge of that who has a rigor and a structure and a process which reflects the wider cultural picture, because I think both of those things are important. You can have important cultural messages about working alongside people, but if you don't have good systems and structures in place that support that, and that they're rigorously applied, then you don't have the impact. But similarly, if you've just got processes and you don't have the cultural bit that sits behind it, then the processes don't have the impact that they would have. So to be fair to Janice, she's been able to bring both of those things to bear, right? And we've got a rigorous system and process which Janice has supported a group of pupil support teachers in honing their practice to make it really impactful. And that's not an easy job either. So that's worth acknowledging, I think.
Thanks, boss.
Yeah. Well, that's a lovely way, unless Janice, you have anything to add.
No, let's end it there.
That's a lovely way to end. That really is. And if you've got any performance marketing coming up, then I would just play this. So I just want to thank you both for coming along today. It's just been a delight to have you here, and I am blown away by the work that you're doing. I'm pretty sure the listeners will be too. And I suppose probably if they wanted to get in touch at any time just to kind of run some things by you, I'm sure you guys would be okay with
it. I mean, there's a thing there about, right, well, just phone us at the school.
Yes.
Which is what we would want to be as open with everybody about what we're doing, and that's the culture that we've got, and nobody needs to approach you to put you in touch with us. We're just give us a ring.
Okay, well, you heard it here first, listeners. So I'm just going to sign off this particular podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe for notification of when a new episode is published. If there is a topic you would like to hear featured on this podcast, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. Follow us on our social media channels for all the latest news from Education Scotland. Education Scotland is a Scottish Government executive agency charged with supporting quality and improvement in Scottish education.